Try it yourself. Validating web forms using jQuery. In this Try It Yourself exercise, we'll use the jQuery validation plugin to validate a basic web form. The purpose of this exercise is to help you understand how to implement the validation plugin in your own scripts. The code for this exercise is located in the Hour 13 folder. Most of the files we need have the name Hour 1304. Note the library calls we have at the top of the HTML file. We need the jQuery file, obviously, but we also need the jQuery validation plugin, which you can retrieve from the book's code listings archive. There's a local copy there, or you can download a version from the internet. The HTML is a basic form that shouldn't contain any surprises. The CSS does include some specific formatting for the validation code. Specifically, line 3 formats the input and select elements to have a red background and text to make them stand out. Line 4 formats the message to be in red text also. Before we look at the JavaScript, why don't we select the HTML file and load it up in a browser so you can see how it works. I'm going to intentionally violate the validation rules. You'll notice here as soon as I start typing, the validation rule says we need at least 5 characters. For email, it needs a valid email address. So it's looking for a top-level domain. Password tells us that it has to be between 6 and 12 characters long and that they have to match. Last battle you can't skip. You have to have at least one choice from this list. You have to do handedness, which I'll leave out for a moment. As soon as you select a weapon, 2 pieces of armor are required, and we'll click Engage. Notice that the screen dims and we have some form errors. I have to submit handedness. It looks like I have to select a separate weapon, and I need a valid date. Let's see if that took. There's no additional code, it just simply refreshes the form. Now then, back to the JavaScript. Let's take a look at how this works under the hood. As usual, we have our ready function. This includes a validate call on the form. We're including a rules, messages, and error placement section. Notice that the validation object variable is defined in line 2 so that we can call it later. Starting on line 4, we have validation rules for each form element. The elements are all referenced by the element's name attribute. The password1 element has 3 rules: required, range length, and equal to. The equal to is set to the ID attribute of the password2 element. The weapon element uses a range length of 2, which forces the user to pick exactly 2 weapons. Look at line 12. Here we have custom messages, to be more specific, for the password, weapon, and armor elements. Line 16, we finish off the error placement function. We see a radio group for hands and a button group for armor. You want the error message to be displayed after the label of the last element in the group, so you modify the insert after method to query for the last checkbox or radio, and then get the very next label. Finally, on line 23, towards the bottom, we validate the form, which will display the requirements after the page is loaded. Lines 24 and 25 are a submit handler. The handler checks to see whether the form is valid by calling form. If the form is invalid, an alert message is displayed and the submit is prevented by prevent default.